following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. In this episode of the Farmall Super C Restoration, we're concentrating on getting the tree on, which is the posts at the steering wheel and the lights and all the levers and the gauges are on, and then we'll get the gauges in, get the levers all set for the hydraulics, and wire the tractor. I'm just about ready to paint this batch of parts, and it's lots of little pieces, you know, control arms and steering linkages, pieces of the headlights, controls, little wiring clips to hold the wiring in place, the cross post that the headlights mount to, and some of the controls, and little brackets, and the steering column, and the can that everything goes into as far as wiring. So it's lots of little stuff, but before I paint, I have to finish up this. This sits right in front of you when you're driving the tractor. I think it sits this way. I can't remember. I think it does. And these are the levers that you pull back and forth to actuate the rock shafts up at the touch control, which is another word for hydraulic unit. And there's one that goes on the other side. I assembled one. You can see there's a whole bunch of business in here having to do with having the lever stay in place when you push it to a certain spot or another. And I'll put the second one together and show you how it works. This is one of those things where you debate, well, should I paint it together or apart? And I elected to paint it together because you have to do so much messing around to get it together, to get this spring shoved in here and get everything set. There's a friction disc here and a spring here that helps hold the lever in place wherever you put it. And this is an old friction disc here. You can see how narrow it is, and this is a replacement friction disc, and I got replacement springs for it here. I broke a spring way back when and had to kind of cobble together, cut a spring to fit. So we're going to replace it with the right springs. First thing that goes in is this control arm through this sleeve, and then there's a washer that goes on the inside. These are no fun to put together. I did this once years ago, and now I have to do it again on the same unit. We'll get in there. And then once you get the washer set in, you got to kind of cram the spring in, and the washer drops on the floor, of course. Then kind of work the spring down, but there's a lip, you got to get it over here, and you got to get over the edge of the washer. So now it's time to use your favorite colorful words while you try and get this set. Because it's a pain, and the washer fell out. Well, I'm not going to worry about you right now. We'll just take you out of here and try and get the spring over this first lip. You know, people are watching. You need to cooperate. That's the deal. I made a deal with you. I would make you new if you cooperated. Told you I got more patience than you do. So now we got the spring and the washer in there, and the spring is under compression. I can tell you that. And now we got to get the little keeper in on the other end of the spring. The keeper is this doohickey and slides down over a flat spot in the shaft. So you got to look through the spring and find the flat spot. And then you got to cram this thing in here. But it'll only go in after you drop it 10 times. It's kind of working. Let's tap that over. Then we can put this friction disc in, which goes in on this face here. And this lever, which goes in here. We got to make sure we got it oriented properly. And of course, it's a tight fit to get in. There we go. These bolts here, these jam nuts, adjust the tension on the friction ring. We'll just get them all the way out so we can get this thing set in where it's supposed to. Is that right? Yep, that's right. Right orientation. Get that all lined up in there. Then we got a spring pin to put in here. There we go. Now to finish this little pain in the butt, as you can see, we have a floppy lever. Well, this one's nice and tight. And the way that you adjust how hard the lever moves is by these nuts on the side here that put more spring pressure on the friction plate. Just tighten it down. That's where we want to be. And tighten the jam nuts together. And hopefully I won't have to do this job ever again. Now it is time to paint. Let's get started with something easy here. This is the starter. Start with the starter. I went through this starter off camera. I put new brushes and bushings in it, cleaned it up, lubricated it. There was nothing really wrong with it. It was just a freshen up. I think what I'll do is I'll put the gauges into this box here while it's off the tractor. It's just easier to work with. So this is the ammeter. This is a fuse holder that goes right in the keyed hole. It has a collar on the back to hold it in. And here we have the light switch. This is a replacement that I put in a long time ago. And I'm going to hook at least this wire on it before I put it in, because it's easier this way. This is the power in wire to the light switch. Goes on this terminal here. And that wire goes to one terminal of the fuse. Well, let's get this in here first and then we'll mess with it. Around on the other side there's a lock washer and a nut. I'm done. No, I'm not. Then we can take this box and mount it to the tractor, because we got to start putting some long wires on. Get on there. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scratch the paint. Before I get any more wiring in, I want to get this temperature gauge in, because it's got to thread all the way through. And it goes right under here. I think that's level. And the capillary tube from it needs to go through this hole and down this way. And it goes into the outlet tube on the head here. Now we can get started with the main wiring harness. Oh, I dropped one. I get all my wiring harnesses from Brillman, and the reason is because they look factory with cloth braids and everything. I've made some of my own wiring harnesses, but I sure do like the appearance of these when you're all done. So we've got to find the main wire here that goes up to the alternator and things. I guess we can start with this one. The wire is managed on this tractor. It all runs up either side of this torque tube, and it's got holders along where the pump goes. So this one runs on this side and goes to the hot post on the starter, which is where it grabs battery power from the big cable coming in. We'll just temporary that till we get the battery cable on. And then this longer wire comes up and would normally go to the coil here, but since we have a ballast resistor in line, it's coming into the resistor. Because we're running with 12 volts on a 6-volt coil. And this end of this wire goes up through this hole in the box. And then from the starter it goes to the one side of the ammeter here to bring power into the ammeter. And the other wire, which runs from the coil, goes into the ignition switch, which I got to put in. So here's the ignition switch. These are a lot easier to wire before you put them in. So all this ignition switch does is it turns on juice to the coil when you pull it out. I suppose you could wire it to provide power to the lights too, if you wanted to. But then the coil would be, and the points would be energized while you're running the lights. So to keep the points from burning out, usually they're wired off the ammeter. And then on the other side of the tractor, we've got the alternator. This is the juice wire, charge wire from the alternator. This is a wiring kit that's specifically for one-wire alternator conversion, so no regulator wires in this. And the other end of this wire comes into the wiring box over here and hooks to the other side of the ammeter. Here comes the ignition switch all wired up. I'm going to assemble this before I put it on the tractor because it makes it easier to wire the headlights to go through it. You'll see what I mean. This is another one of those jobs that can be kind of tough. We'll see how it goes. This has got Allen head screws that secure it into place. The cross arm anyway. Now I'm going to run a fish wire from each end down through the pipe. Sisal twine because that's what I had on hand. I know there's probably better types to use, but this was on the shelf. You gotta look for it coming through here in the bottom. This T-shape is our front headlights wire, so each end of the Y goes onto one of the fish ropes, wires. Then we can start pulling it through. That one is for that side. And I found last time I did this that you should pull them through evenly. Got them both started. There's one out. There's the other one out. Got to hook the headlight wire that comes down through to the light switch and put that back in. Here's the wiring from the coil, and the easiest way to remember which side of the coil to connect is the ground on the coil always goes to the distributor. So if you've got a negative ground tractor, the negative post on the coil goes to the distributor. To the points, really. Experts will disagree on how important this is, saying the coil repolarizes itself, but experts disagree on everything. That's what I've found anyway. And then on the positive side, we've got wire coming from the battery through the ignition switch, goes through the resistor here, gets reduced to 6 volts, and then travels on to the coil positive terminal. That takes care of the coil and distributor wiring. Now we got to do some wire management because we got wires hanging all over the place. Unfortunately, if you have a copy of the parts manual for the tractor you're working on, at least for internationals, they show the wire routing and where all the clips go that hold the wires in place. Makes it a lot easier to reassemble because there's dozens of clips on some of these tractors. So for this side, starting at the front, and I actually remember this one being here, this is the old generator regulator wiring clip and holds the wire here. International use these wiring clips on every tractor, I think from the F20 up through the 66 series. They just bend over and they kind of hold the wire in place like that. Then we've got one here on one of the clamps for the air cleaner. Same wire. And then as the wire comes back along the frame here, this is where the hydraulic touch control unit mounts. And we've got wire management trays that go along here. Clipped right on the same bolts as the touch control is. Touch control will go on a little bit later. Just work the wire into this trough. Probably should have put this on before I finish the ends of the wire. It's a tight squeeze. And then finally on this side we've got the bolt underneath the battery box, and that's got a clip on it. Give it some room here. There's one side done. On the other side, we've got a clip right here, which of course I forgot to clean up and paint. We'll put that on later. Then on this side, we've got another one of these troughs, tubes, whatever they are. I'm going to put the capillary tube from the temperature gauge into this one as well. And the main wire for this side of the tractor. If I can get it in. We can leave this in loose because it'll actually mount on top of the base of the hydraulic unit. Just temporary. And then there's another mount, or maybe two on this side, but I'm going to wait because the hydraulic hoses come through here. Wait till I get those on to put these in. Here's the view inside the finished wiring box. There's not a lot to it really. Unfortunately, the headlights are going to have to wait. I got new 12-volt bulbs for them and everything's cleaned up, but I got to get new rubber seals that go around here because the old ones were all cracked. Bummer. Now you start putting parts back on the tree, starting with the throttle assembly here. And this lever that raises and lowers the fast hitch. Then assemble the quadrants for the fast hitch controls, the rock shafts. And here are the quadrants themselves. Each of them gets 2 stops, which if you're plowing or cultivating, you can kind of use these to set the automatic depth, move them back and forth to where you want them. Gets a bolt and a spacer. And the other quadrant for the other lever goes on here. Now on this side, eventually the touch control heat indicator will go right in here, but I forgot to clean it up with this round of parts, so we'll do it the next time around. And I'm going to leave everything loose here because when we get the touch control hooked up to the linkages here, we'll adjust this quadrant based on where the stops are in the touch control. Well, that's good enough for now. And of course there are covers here that go over the friction mechanism in here, but I'll wait to put those on until we tighten up the bolts here when everything's set. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Yeah, not yet. Before I put the steering shafts on, I'm going to lube up these U-joints. It's a lot easier to do it hanging up like this than it is on the tractor. For this lower shaft, what I'm going to do is flip it because this is where this bearing has worn on it. And it's the same on both ends, so that's an easy way to take a little bit of play out of the steering, I guess. Just flip it. We got a key that goes in here. And then we've got this 2-piece bearing which holds the other end of the shaft. And a spring pin to hold this in place. Steering wheel holder. Actually, we want to wait to hook that up. We want to wait. Not enough hands. Let's get this in where it should be down here at the joint. Spring pin to secure this joint, I had to drill it oversized because the steering shaft had egged out. So that tightens things back up. There we go. She steers easily, even just sitting on concrete. Much easier than the wide front did, I know that for sure. When I first got this tractor, I went through the steering box, which is integrated into this casting right here, and put in new bearings and rotated the gears and tightened everything up. That's the message. That's it for this batch of parts on the Super C. I think that next I'll do the hydraulics, put the pump and the plumbing, the touch control unit, and maybe the seat as well, and maybe the linkages too if I have room. There's a ton of them that run through here. We're making progress. I got a long ways to go, especially considering the sheet metal comes at the end, and I always spend forever dinking around with sheet metal to get it right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Probably be about a week, maybe a little more. I don't know. Something like that.